You're listening to the Coangler's Garage podcast, episode number 4 with Thaddeus Vinson, the first place coangler at the 2025 BAM Pro-Am at Don Pedro Reservoir. Hey everybody, welcome to Coangler's Garage. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Thaddeus Vinson. Thaddeus is a super accomplished coangler out here on the West Coast with 2 major wins under his belt. One in a Wild West Bass Trail event at Lake Shasta that I believe was in 2021 that we'll probably talk about a little bit. And then also most recently at the BAM Pro-Am at Don Pedro. He's also an entrepreneur in the fishing industry, and I think we'll cover that a little bit as well. But Thaddeus, super excited to have you on, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Really glad to be here. This is my new favorite podcast. I really enjoyed the first 2. There might be another one in between then and now, but I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, thanks so much. You were, I think, our first or second subscriber, if I remember correctly. And you know, it's a small group at this point, but this is actually one of, if you can believe it, 5 podcasts I'm recording this week. So there's going to be a burst of content in the near future, and hopefully that'll, grow the eyeballs a little bit.
Nice. Good work.
3 of them are from east of the Rockies. So we're hoping to get people out there interested in this as well.
Okay.
So, hey, I mentioned a little bit about your background, but it'd be great if you could maybe tell the viewers a little bit about your history in fishing, and kind of, most of us started fishing as kids, and I noticed your area code doesn't look like Southern Oregon to me. So I'm curious where you grew up, how you got interested in fishing, and
so
ultimately
I was
in bass
born
fishing.
in Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah.
And so my whole family fished, so it's just kind of been in my blood since I was born. And me and my mom moved to Washington when I was really little. And I started fishing for steelhead and salmon there. And me and my mom would travel all over, and she would take me to Montana and Idaho and wherever I wanted to go, she would take me. And so that's how I got into it. And then we moved to a lake called Duck Lake in Ocean Shores, Washington. And it was a great bass fishery at the time. And I had my little, I don't know what you'd call it, a bathtub boat with a little trolling motor. And when I wasn't in school, that's where I was, is out fishing. And so that's where I learned, kind of taught myself the fundamentals of fishing. And as I got older, basketball started to become more of a thing in high school. So I kind of cut back on the fishing, and then went to college, and kind of got out of fishing totally until I moved to Southern Oregon and decided I wanted to start tournament fishing. And I'd never been in a bass boat before. And I decided I wanted to fish the MLF Havasu event for my first tournament ever.
And what year was that?
That was 2015.
Okay.
So I went in there not knowing what to expect really at all. I just was winging it. I went with my buddy Colby Pearson.
Yeah.
And I remember my first day like it was yesterday. I got in the boat, and we were about to blast off, and my pro, what was his name? A young guy. He fishes actually on the East Coast now as a professional. Gosh dang it, it'll come to me. But he looked at me and he's like, "Are you ready? We're about to blast off." And I was like, "Yeah, let's go." And so he takes off. Within 5 seconds, my hat flies off.
Yeah.
And I can't breathe. The wind is going in my face so hard that I'm like choking on the air.
Yeah.
And just covering my face. And we pull up to the first spot, and my eyes are watering. And he's like, "Have you ever went that fast?" And I was like, "No, I've never even been in a boat." So So I didn't even have a hat the whole day. I'm just wearing like my hood and just like not even knowing what I'm doing. Like he's kind of showing me the ropes. He's like, you can kind of cast here and here. And so I was like, okay. And he turned on some music. We were listening to country music the whole time. And I ended up catching a fish. But that was my first experience at tournament fishing. And from there, I just kind of kept it rolling. And if you look at my FLW MLF stats, you'll see I'm probably the worst coangler in history in that circuit. I think I fished 9 tournaments in a row, and my 9th tournament I cashed my first check for $500. So my career earnings are $500.
The trajectories that go in the right way, though.
Yeah. So that's when, about the time when Wild West came about.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. And I ended up, let's see, I think, I'm not sure how many you fished. It might have been my first tournament, but it was at Clear Lake. And I had never caught, I think my biggest fish was like a 6-pounder. And my first 2 fish of the day were both 8-pounders. And so I had 24 pounds after the first day, and went into the final day with a 6-pound lead, and ended up blowing it. I lost by like 0.15 pounds. So I got second place. And that's when things started to change. I really like had the itch like of wanting to win one bad. And didn't happen for 6 more years after that. But went to Shasta and got lucky. It was a 2-day event. I can't remember if it was because of wind or because COVID. But I ended up winning that tournament and then being really successful at Shasta, which is kind of like my home lake. It's 2.5 hours from here, but my home big tournament lake.
You live in Medford, right?
Yeah. And
that's in Southern Oregon for those of you who
are familiar. It's like 45 minutes from the border of California. And then just kind of did okay in between then and Don Pedro. And then Don Pedro, I've never been there. I didn't practice, but I knew they had spotted bass and largemouth. So I knew it would fish similar to Shasta, but with more largemouth. So that's the only clue I had going into it.
Yeah.
And
so going back to your background, you mentioned basketball. Sounds like maybe you played competitively in high school. Is that right? And
yeah, high school and a little bit of college.
And college as well. Okay, cool. I find, there's a lot of guys both at the pointy end of the boat and at the back end of the boat in the circuits that we fish who have a background in some sort of competitive activity. And
I've noticed that too.
Yeah. And I think it helps people scratch that itch a little bit.
For sure. Like when you're a ball player, ball is life, and then all of a sudden you don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And what do you turn to?
Yep.
Lucky for me, I love to fish, but I could still compete at fishing. I don't actually fun fish a lot because I just enjoy the competition of it. So my fishing time is going to tournaments.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You mentioned not practicing for Pedro, and just now you mentioned not fishing much in between events. I think you saw Dante Ray's interview, and Dante Ray is kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, where I think he's on the water every single moment he gets a chance. I have in my world I have work and family responsibilities that make it a little challenging to practice for events a lot of the time. So many of them I do not practice. And, I've had some good results. I've had some bad results, but I'm always curious to talk to people who don't practice, who do well. And I'm curious, for you, do you think it makes a difference when you do practice?
For me,
if you ever have.
I have before.
Yeah.
And I don't think that practice for me has ever really helped. Probably because I could get on something in practice and we may not be fishing anything close to that by the time the tournament starts.
Yeah.
And that bite may be gone by the tournament starts anyways. You'll notice like the first day of practice.
Sure.
I have practiced when I first started.
Yeah. Yeah.
First day of practice, they're biting everything you want to throw at them. By the time the tournament starts, they don't want to touch anything you were throwing. So I like to go in fresh, and I think it's exciting. And a 3-day tournament is long, and I don't want to be there for 4 or 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
I get pretty burnt out by then. So by the end of the third day, I'm pretty good for the month. Like I'm like, okay, I got it out of my system. I can go to work, do the things I need to do. I'll be ready for the next tournament. So I don't fish a lot in between. I fished one time this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
And that's it.
So I've noticed for me that in many tournaments, the weights on day one are a little higher than day two, across the field, with a little pressure. Sometimes the weights are lower for bags on day two. But for me personally, I think there's a trend towards having a bigger bag on day two than day one. And I've always attributed that for me to not practicing and spending the time on day one kind of going through the baits that aren't going to get them at that tournament.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I maybe it's different for different people, and I'm probably not able to, to fish on the fly and figure it out quite as fast as you are maybe sometimes.
Well, you look at
it's interesting. Yeah.
You look at my finishes and you'll see a top 10 and then you'll see 100th place. So you could tell that sometimes practice is necessary. Sometimes it's not. I've fished so many tournaments now in different times of the year that I do have some history I can go back to. I can say, oh, I did fish Clear Lake in April and this was good and I could possibly be doing this or this. So I'll be prepared that way. The first day I'll have 6 or 7 or 8 rods.
Yeah.
Second day I'll have 4 rods. Third day I might have 2 or 3.
Yeah. Got it. Cool. So you mentioned Colby Pearson, who, no slouch, obviously as a fisherman. Anybody on the West Coast is going to know who he is, and certainly a lot of people east of the Rockies as well. But I'm curious, you mentioned he's a buddy of yours. How did you guys meet? This was prior to tournaments for you?
Yeah. So when I started to get into fishing again, I was just kind of like pond hopping and watching every YouTube video I could. I think having like the sports background and the hard work ethic and how far behind I was, I knew I had to work like really hard and get every advantage I could at 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I knew that Colby was pretty much the man around here. He was young, but he knew the stuff that I needed to know. So I would go into Sportsman's Warehouse and where he worked, and I would just chat with him. I'd be like, "Hey, can we go fishing sometime? I'll pay for everything." Blah blah blah. I'm sure he heard it from everybody. So he was like, "Oh yeah." Nothing really happened from it, and then finally he took me fishing, and that's like almost a cheat code for me because my learning curve, I don't know what you call it, longer or shorter, is like I can learn a year's worth of knowledge in a few days of fishing with him, right? And if I have a question or what would take me, trial and error forever to figure out, I can just say, hey, should I do this or should I not? And he can just give me the straight answer. And then I just need to take his word for it. And I used to kind of be like, no, I'll listen, but I'll try my own thing. And then what happens every time is I'll go back to what he told me to do. And that's the right answer. So now I just say, hey, like he took me to the pond the other day. I was like, hey, will you show me how to do this? Because I'm going to Havasu soon. And a little bait that he likes to throw there. And I was like, just let me watch you throw this. So he threw 3 casts with it, and then I threw 1 cast with it. He said, yep, that's good. I said, okay, we're done. So instead of me spending days trying to figure it out, now I already know what to do in 5 minutes. So it's kind of a cheat code for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let's talk, if it's okay, about some of those good tournament results. And maybe we can even go chronologically, because you've already talked about Don Pedro on the BAM podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way. But if you go back to Clear Lake, you mentioned a really good April tournament, couple 8-pounders on day one. We have a lot of listeners who I think are interested in, as you'd be crazy not to be interested in Clear Lake around that time of the year.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can talk a little bit with as much detail or as little detail as you want about Clear Lake and how you approach it at that time of year, it might be interesting.
Well, that particular tournament,
yeah,
I also fished one a few weeks back.
Yeah.
Which I'll go to after.
Okay, sure.
But that first tournament, I was fishing a drop shot, and the water was a little bit dirty, but I knew just from the dock talk and everything that the fish were spawning.
Yeah.
So I was going into it thinking, okay, I need to fish for these spawning fish, but I got to figure out, what my pro is doing, because if he's fishing for him, I'll have to figure out something else. And so I think I had a LV 500 tied on in case he was bed fishing, because that's the furthest thing I could throw, away from the boat, which is my strategy a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that I can fan cast everywhere if we're just sitting there. But he wasn't bed fishing my first day. So I was just looking at these holes in the tules, and I was just thinking to myself, I can't see any fish, but if there was a fish, it'd probably be here or here. And that just worked out really well for me. It's just kind of like, I don't know, getting lucky. There's either going to be a fish there or there's not, and just pitch into every single hole.
Yeah. You were prepared to get lucky, though.
Yeah. And
opportunity met preparation.
Yeah. And yeah, that's good. I like that. And so that just worked out for me the whole tournament until the final day, which back then in the Wild West, they would give the co a boat to fish the final day.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And like I was saying before, I had never been in a boat at the beginning of my career, so I definitely have never ran a boat.
Yeah.
So I took the boat out on the final day, and I found by this time the bedfish were all in 2 feet of water, and I could see them, and I'm looking at 7-pounders, and I spend my whole day trying to catch these fish, and I couldn't do it. Hindsight, if I would have had a pro that day and I was just doing the thing I was doing, I probably could have done a lot. But that's how that tournament went. This next tournament, a few weeks ago, I had the same history in mind. I'm thinking it's this time they'll probably be bed fishing.
Yeah. And can I ask, is this is the one bass tournament?
Yeah.
Clear Lake. Yeah. And so for folks who are listening who don't know one bass, it's put on by Western Outdoor News, which is a great publication out here on the West Coast. And it's a shared weight tournament so that the Coangler and the pro have a combined five fish bag, like a team tournament. And then you rotate and fish with a different pro every day. Yeah,
that's a good thing to say, because it's a totally different approach for me. So my approach for the one bass is, how can I help my pro how can I contribute one fish to his bag? Basically, that's my goal.
Yep.
If I get 2 or 3, he's going to be real happy. But how can I get him one fish, right? So, and I'm sure most people saw the results of this tournament. Like, some people were getting almost 40-pound bags. How am I going to, if I draw John Pearl, how am I going to contribute to a bag with his small fish is 6 pounds? I can't do the things that I'm doing. I'm going to have to figure out something. And I don't know if any of his goes helped him or not with that, but that's a tough task right there.
Yeah, for sure. But a great learning opportunity if it happens.
Oh yeah, for sure. So and this is going to be a whole nother subject too, is fishing is kind of changing now. So I couldn't get bid on anything I really wanted to catch him on at this tournament, which was like a really hard. It seemed like the bite was really, really hard for me. It's like the hardest bite I've ever had there, but the weights don't show that.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'm wondering if without like the forward facing sonar, what the bite would have been like. You know, it was 20 pounds a big bag. I don't know, because I'm assuming that a lot of guys were doing that. And so it's going to be hard to adapt to that when guys are catching these giant fish out in the middle of the lake, maybe not the middle, but pretty far offshore, and you don't really know what to cast at because you're just kind of fishing blind there. So I experienced that a little bit.
Can I stop you there for just 1 second?
Yeah.
So I also have experienced, so a year ago, I fished the last Toyota series, you know, before they left the West Coast, the last one that they had at Clear Lake before the rest of their tournaments in the West last year. And I had you know, to some extent, Clear Lake has my number in tournaments. I love fun fishing there, but it just has not been a great tournament lake for me personally compared to some others. But at that tournament in particular, a lot of the fishing was happening in spawning bays with, you know, large numbers of boats, everybody pinging forward facing sonar. And I mean, there must have been so many forward facing sonar beams, you know, hitting each of the fish in these modest size spawning bays, that I found myself wondering if, in addition to the offshore element where it's tough on the Coangler in a non-shared weight tournament, particularly in that setting, the fish seem more finicky. And, you know, if they were biting, they weren't, you know, biting like they typically would. And they were harder to come by. And I wonder if we're kind of entering an era where also, you know, in the springtime in places like that, where there's, you know, it's either a community hole or it's a major spawning bay with a lot of traffic. It seems like it might be getting more challenging than it used to. And I've found myself wondering if it's the sonar.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And when we get to Don Pedro, I may have some examples of that. But yeah, I think everything I say is my opinion. I'm never claiming to be right here, about anything.
Yeah.
But I feel like for the next couple of years, the guys that get really, really good with their electronics are going to have a heyday and just really do well. And then all of a sudden, maybe things will start going back to old ways. Because like you're saying, just getting beamed from every direction, those fish are going to catch on pretty soon, I would think. But yeah, I think you're right. I think those beams hitting them over and over and over, they got to be doing something to them. Like, and then seeing their buddies just, you know, getting caught every direction. Like, it's got to do something. But who knows? Maybe it'll be a forever thing. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think most things in this sport are cyclical. You know, they work really well for a while, and then they become just another tool, whether it's a lure or technology. And then sometimes a lure that goes away, is out of favor, you know, comes back because there's a whole generation of bass that haven't seen it. So for me personally, it doesn't diminish my interest in fishing these tournaments. It's just sort of another challenge to overcome. And I think it's going to be interesting to see 2-3 years from now whether things swing back.
I like it. I think it's great. I think it's actually going to benefit co-anglers because there's going to be many times when your pro is so fixed on looking at his screen. If he's casting distance from the bank you may have to, put on a little heavier weight or whatever to reach it, but you're going to get a lot of stuff to fish that he's not going to touch because he's trying to catch his own fish. So it's not a problem. I don't think it should deter anybody from fishing as a co.
Yeah.
And there's going to be bad draws. It's just part of the game where you're just out in the middle of nowhere and you can't do anything, but it's not going to happen that often, once in a while.
Yep. Agreed. And like you were saying, with the pros so focused on that screen, there are times when you're within a casting distance, whether it's a short or a long cast, of an actual high potential visible target. That without the sonar, they might have fished that and, vacuumed everything that was there up. And instead you may find you have an opportunity when guys' eyes are so glued to that screen.
Yeah, for sure. And in the one bass, since you're on a team, if your pro is strategic and they have a good co, they can use you to their advantage. And there may be multiple fish they see, and he could say, hey, cast this way 60 feet. There's one right there. And then he can catch this one, and you can do double time, if your co is good enough. You could instead of just leaving him back there and saying, just do whatever, that's not very strategic. I mean, I would be using my co's to my advantage for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even in non-shared weight tournaments, in contexts where you develop a pretty good rapport with the pro over the course of the day, I've had some experiences where, they've been very focused on, say, a target, like a brush pile or something on the bottom that they're using their forward facing sonar on, but they happened to swing around and noticed a couple fish somewhere that I could cast to. And I've had some examples where somebody said, hey, you should cast over in that direction. There's a couple fish. So that's one of the reasons why I try to encourage people to, do everything you can to cheer on the guy in the front, guy or gal, because typically
definitely,
it helps in the end.
And try to set the tone right away. I mean, give them some gas money, ask some questions, be super friendly. Don't jump up at your first spot and bomb a cast up front, wait for him to cast. Like, just make sure he's not going to have to worry about you for the day.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And then he's more likely to help you out, later in the day. Be like, hey, how many you got? 4? I know a spot where we can get one right here. Let's go.
Yep, totally. So anything more you want to share about your Clear Lake experiences? Or if not, I was thinking maybe we could touch on that Shasta tournament.
No, I'm ready for Shasta.
Okay. So I remember that tournament, and I remember, I think you mentioning Steelhead Slammers, your company, when they were interviewing you. I'm curious, did those truly play a role? What else worked? What was that tournament like?
Those did not play a role.
Yeah.
I do catch fish on them, the feathered trebles. These little guys on the back of a spinner will catch them wherever there's shad. I mean,
hold it up a little bit more to your left.
Let me get the real thing. I'm sure everybody growing up as kids caught bass on spinners. It's probably the easiest thing to catch fish on.
Yeah, totally. Nice.
And that's what I grew up catching bass on, is like meps, a chartreuse or white meps, or a blue fox, or a rooster tail.
Yeah, I used meps and rooster tails when I was a kid. Yep,
yeah,
totally.
For sure. So if somebody just wants to catch fish, you just cast this and reel it. Cast it wherever you want and just reel it in. And that's
easy
all.
peasy. Yep.
For sure. But no, I didn't catch any on there. And I kind of felt bad about it, for like plugging my business. And I was like, because then people wanted them for bass. And I was like, they'll catch them, but I didn't use it in the tournament. So
yeah.
But yeah,
it helps get some eyes on your business for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I would imagine. Yeah, that's good.
But
And
anyway, yeah.
there's also Thaddeus. There's a lot of multi-species anglers who fish those Shasta tournaments. So even if they don't want them for bass, I suspect there's been a few people who have picked them up and catch a steelhead every now and then
Oh
on
yeah.
those.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, tell us a little bit about that tournament and how it went.
That tournament, I was throwing a Cinco the whole time. With it being so close to us, I was able to practice a little bit. I'm sure I had like a club tournament or ABA or something before that. And at that time period, all I would throw was a Cinco. I'd bring two rods, and one had a Cinco on it, and the other had a Cinco on it.
Nail weighted or
one
just
nail weighted and one weightless.
Okay. Yep.
And at that time, if you could get your 5-inch weightless Cinco to touch the bottom of the lake, you were probably going to catch a fish.
Yeah.
If you had enough patience enough, and if your pro wasn't power fishing. And so that's how I was catching them. And I didn't do great on the first day. I think I was in 39th or 29th. But after day one, that's still within striking distance always, if you can, stay in the top half. And then the second day, I drew a guy that was fishing deeper, and he was leaving me everything shallow.
Mm-hmm.
So I was casting at the shore all day, and I just got really lucky and caught a 4.5 pounder, which now that's not big. Back then,
yeah,
you're probably going to get close to a big fish check.
Yeah. And that was a spot, I assume.
Yeah, all spots. Yeah. I remember later in the day, and that was also when 10 pounds was a good bag.
Yeah.
That was what you'd shoot for. And you still kind of do. You shoot for your smallest fish to be a 2-pounder. And if your smallest fish is a 2-pounder there, you're doing pretty good. But I had a 1.5 pounder in there, and I knew I needed to get rid of that one to win. Sometimes you just have a feeling, you just have a good idea of how everything is fishing. You're like, gosh, I need this to be able to win. And so I remember taking my weightless Cinco, casting out in 40 or 50 feet of water, sitting down. I had a chair in the back, sitting down and eating my sandwich and flipping the bail over. I was thinking, well, it's probably been sitting on the bottom for a while. I'll check it. Flipped it over, lifted it up, and it was a 3-pounder. And when I got that in, I was like, okay, I know I have a chance to win now.
That's awesome.
And that's how it played out.
Yeah. The weightless Senkos are, I think it's no secret, from the pointy end of the boat there's a few people that fish them, and I like fishing them, fun fishing there. If you're not moving fast and you're patient, that can be a great way to tempt a bigger fish at Shasta.
Right.
But it's super tough from the back. So as you were saying, you got to have the right guy, and I think you got to maybe have some confidence that you're around enough fish and enough larger fish to take the time for it to sink rather than making more casts, maybe.
Well, also
with a heavier bait.
Yeah, for sure. Also at Shasta, if they're biting really good, it can actually hurt you to throw a weightless Cinco because you have to wait for it to hit the bottom.
Yeah.
When other times you just got to hit the bottom as fast as you can because they're just going to eat it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So I was talking a little bit I think it was in the Dante podcast, we were talking a little bit about the phenomenon of once you fished a few tournaments as a co-angler there, you start to get the sense that there is some size class grouping of fish, such that Dante and I were talking about the fact that, many people say that if you're catching like the 1 1/3 pounders, the 1.5 pounders, it's pretty rare that you're going to run into a 2.5 or a 3 in that context. And I'm just curious if that's been your experience as well.
I think so. I think you're right. Not always, obviously, but if you catch 10 1.5 pounders, you should probably just go somewhere else because I don't think you're going to catch a bigger one. There was a there was an ABA earlier this year that me and Colby fished,
Mm-hmm.
and we found a group of them that were probably 3 to 8 pounds, and there was 20 of them in the group, and there was nothing small in there. You couldn't catch a fish under 2 pounds. So they definitely group up. I mean, I have caught like 2.5 pounders with those 1.5 pounders, but never like a real good one.
Yeah. Cool. Well, winning a tournament at Shasta is not easy to do, and it's always fun there. You know, the weights are getting a little bit bigger now, but I think it's fun there because like you're saying, as long as you're in the top half after the first day, you're kind of within striking distance.
Yeah, you can't win it, or what's that saying? You can't win it the first day, but you can lose it. I've lost it many times on the first day.
Yep. Yeah. I've certainly done the same. I've had, I haven't won one there, but I've been in the top 10 there. Someday I'll be like you and win one there, I hope. But let's move on to Pedro. So I listened to your podcast with Big Ed on the BAM pod. And so you mentioned what you did over 3 days. You mentioned plastic worms basically playing a role, fished either Nico or drop shot, if I remember correctly, and color not really mattering. You had, it sounded kind of nonchalant. You were picking up one here with this color and one here with another color. You ran out, and then I think you said you went to the Don Pedro market and picked up some pink ones after catching them on a green one the day before. But the one thing that really struck me was you talked about a key fish that came in a context where you were basically leaving your drop shot with a relatively heavy weight in places that you thought looked good, like they were likely to harbor fish, and basically just opening the bail and fishing way behind the boat. And to me, there were some echoes of, I remember when I first started fishing as a coangler, for me, it was, I think, about 3 years after you. And either then or not too long after that, there were several articles that Todd Klein wrote, and I think a video or two. And he'd been super successful out of the back of the boat. And I remember very clearly one of the things he mentioned was how important long casts were. And it sounded like maybe he fished spinning rod a little bit more than some people would, even with a little bit heavier line to make long casts. So I was curious if maybe, rather than kind of going over the same territory that you went over in the other podcast, if you could talk a little bit about that tournament in general. Maybe there's a little bit more, there's a few other insights, but I'm also curious to hear you talk about how long casts play a role for you, because you mentioned that a moment ago at Clear Lake as well, I think.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was going to get to when we were talking about the beams hitting them, because at Pedro, I don't know exactly, but I believe there was like a bunch of tournaments back to back to back right before that tournament.
Yeah, and in fact, I think because of the golden mussel issue at the Delta, Pedro was one of the easiest places to reschedule a tournament. So I think you're right. It was getting kind of slammed.
Yeah. So the pros I drew, they've been there practicing. So if they take us to a spot, I know they took us there for a reason, right? So if we pull up and don't catch any, I know they're there, but why are they not biting is what I'm thinking to myself. And that's when I started doing the really long casts, because they're here. Something's going on. The pressure or the beams or whatever is making them not bite when we're around. That whole tournament, I was just launching a 3/8 ounce drop shot as far as I could. I didn't pick up on that right away. The first half of my first day, I wanted to catch him on a Cinco. I wanted to catch him on a Fatty Z. I wanted to catch him on a blade bait. I wanted, all these things I wanted to catch him on. They wouldn't touch it. So when in doubt, you can't catch him, go to a drop shot always. It's
Yep.
I don't think there's a better bait for a co-angler than a drop shot. And it's very like versatile. There's different ways you can rig it. You can rig it with an EWG. You can rig it with a straight shank. You can do just an open hook straight or wacky. So you can fish it in the brush. You can fish it in the tulies. You can fish it out deep. Like you can take a drop shot and fish it anywhere you go in the lake. And so that was kind of my technique the whole tournament is they take us to a spot. We're there for a reason. There's got to be fish here. When we pull away from it, I'm going to make as long as casts I can back to that area. And it worked the whole time. My first pro on day one, Matt Miley.
Yeah.
He was in second after day one. So I felt kind of bad because I did catch quite a few fish in his areas and that I, could have left for him, but what are you supposed to do? I mean, not catch him. I mean, I didn't really know.
It happens.
But what I'm getting at is he was so excited for me to catch him. I had never had anybody yell as loud for me to catch a fish. I caught like I can't remember what it was, 3.5 or 4 pounder. And he put it in the net and was just screaming, and other boats were looking at us. And it wasn't even for him, it was for me. And I thought that was so nice of him because you couldn't actually be that happy for me, but such a good guy that he was screaming and hollering for me. And
super.
I thought it was really cool. And so then after day one, I think I was sitting in 6th, and I drew a guy named Kong the second day. And he did one of those generous things that you were talking about and said, here, I'm going to turn the boat for us because there's fish over here.
Yeah.
They're over in this area. And I stayed on my half of it, but he let me fish half of it. And I ended up catching a 4-something largemouth on that day.
That's great.
Doing the same thing. I did run out of my reddish pink worms on the first day, so I used a green worm the second day. And that bumped me up to 4th or 3rd. I ran out of those worms on day 2. That's when I went to the store and just looked for a good worm because I kind of found out it wasn't exactly a certain bait. Just had to be a good looking worm, but you just had to be far enough away from the boat where they didn't feel you.
Yeah.
And
do you think size mattered with the worm or were they straight
ones.
tails? Yeah,
small,
like
straight tail,
4-inch or
something. Because the Cinco for me, they didn't like it. It was too big for them, I think.
So like a 4-inch finesse worm or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been great. I think I was using about a 5 and a 6, but if I had 4, I would have used that.
Yeah.
So on the 3rd day, I was sitting in 4th, and gosh, I'm forgetting names. Damn it! Such a cool guy too.
The 3rd day.
Yeah,
I think you mentioned. I saw the podcast. I think you said it was Jason Crone.
Yes,
is that right?
Jason Crone.
Yeah.
And
I gotcha.
Thank you. That's the day I knew it was going to be a little bit tougher because he was fishing kind of the same way that I was fishing, a little bit different, but very methodical, hitting everything, not really leaving anything, which good for him. I mean, he was doing really well. He had a chance to win.
Yep.
And so that's when I had to get a little more creative. And that's when I started not just making a long cast, but also opening the bail. Because I knew I just wasn't going to get bit behind him because they weren't going to say no to his and yes to mine. It just wasn't going to happen. So I had to leave it. Like there was times where we'd go across a cove. I would leave it at this point. And we'd get to this point and I'd run out of line. And which I had a lot of line, 10-pound braid, you can hold quite a bit of it. It was a full spool almost of, 150 yards. And I'd just flip over the bail, and it was funny because I'd flip over the bail and say, hey, I got a fish. And he'd look back and we'd see it jump. And when you see a fish jump 100 yards away, you can't really tell what it is. You just know. I mean, it looks like a good one. And he'd say, I'll flip back around and go get it. I was like, no, just keep fishing. In a couple minutes, I'll let you know when it gets here. So I just slow reel them. You hear my drag just slowly reel them across the bay. And I did that a handful of times. And that's when I knew that I kind of was onto something, because it was the boat pressure. They just didn't want to bite. They knew you're there. The water's fairly clear, and they had been hit so hard. So once I caught my last fish, that was like almost a 3-pounder. I was like, somebody really has to get lucky, because even if someone has a 6-pounder, they still have to finish a good limit. So somebody really had to get them to beat me right now. And it turned out I won by a couple pounds. So yeah, that was pretty fun. It's nice when you fish a tournament and everything goes your way, and you don't lose fish, and you just get a feeling like man, when you have a chance to win, you kind of get goosebumps. You're like, I might not win, but I got a chance.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's got to be gratifying. It came in a context where you used your brain to get a little creative and get a few key fish on the last day. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I've kind of figured out that when you just feel hopeless out there, it's like you just can't get a bite. Don't just give up. I used to do it. I used to take naps on the back of the boat, eat my lunch, and just be a spectator the rest of the day. But there's always a way to catch them. You can figure it out. You just, like you kind of said, you got to think outside the box and think, okay, what can I do? Can I grind it out and do what I'm doing and pray for bites? Or can I try to figure out something else to actually, get on something? So,
yeah. So now you got a couple major wins from the back of the boat on the West Coast. And it's sort of like when you're out fun fishing, although, you don't fun fish too much, but, one bite's not a pattern yet, but arguably two's starting to, in some context, it's a pattern, or it's pretty close to feeling confident it's a pattern. I suspect you will win others. That's pretty cool. You're in contention a lot. So congratulations on that. And thanks. I'm sure people who watch this will be super appreciative of both this podcast and the BAM podcast, what you've shared.
My first time doing this, and I'm not great, and I apologize for that. But
you're
I'm doing my best.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. So I guess I've got, we're coming up to almost an hour. I wanted to ask, so you fished the FLW Costa Series / now Toyota Series, some of those events. You fished some one bass events. You fished Wild West Bass Trail, RIP, as you mentioned. And then you fished BAM more recently. How do you feel like the BAM events have been? And amongst all those, what's your favorite? Do you even have a favorite? I get the sense you're kind of a guy who likes to fish derbies as much as you can in the context of your business.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I'm very grateful that BAM started that circuit, because with the MLF leaving, it left nothing where you could fish over here and keep your own weight. Because all it was a shared weight. But I like the one bass with the shared weight and the BAM with the keep your own, because it kind of keeps it fun going back and forth to the different formats, because there's less pressure when you have the shared weight. Well, I don't know. Being a team player, I actually put a little more pressure on myself trying to help them out in the shared weight. But it's a nice change going back and forth. So I'm pretty excited about it. I like the lakes that are coming up that we're fishing, Potholes and Columbia River.
Yeah.
And I like getting out of the Delta, Clear Lake, Shasta. Like fishing these new places is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah. I'm in particular, I love the Columbia, but I've never been to potholes. And I used to live in Seattle for a little bit and used to always, I knew it was on the other side of the mountains and never made it over there while I was up there. And it's been on my list of places I wanted to fish. And
Same. Growing up as a kid,
yeah,
I just remember potholes, potholes, potholes. I was like, oh, I got to go there. I didn't even know where it was. I thought, is it in Chehalis? I don't even know
yeah,
where it is. I just recently figured out actually where it is. I'm like, oh, that's where it is. Okay.
yeah. But for somebody who now spends more time on the delta and some of the lakes around here, it doesn't have the tides, but I think it may actually fish kind of like the delta in the summer, in terms of you know power fishing, using some heavy line, a lot of cover, a lot of grass.
And I will
Uh,
do bad at that tournament. That's one of those, you're going to see me in 100th place
well,
because I hate the Delta. I'm horrible at the Delta. I refuse to cast in the front of the boat,
yeah.
and it's just not a good place for me. So I don't
Well,
know.
if it, I suspect you'll figure it out sooner or later. And if it helps, one of the things we're planning on doing is over the next 2 to 3 weeks in advance of that tournament, trying to have some co-anglers on who have, and more than one, who have had strong results at the Delta over the last 2, 3 years, to talk a little bit about that. So
I'd
maybe
like to
there'll
hear
be a
that.
little nugget in there that could be helpful.
I hope so. Somebody throw me a nugget, please, because I've never cashed a check at the Delta. So somebody
All
give me
right.
something.
Um, so I'm curious, I'm a multi-species angler like you. For me, I grew up in San Diego, and so it was mostly saltwater stuff. But my grandparents lived in Central Oregon, and I spent a lot of time trout fishing up there, as well. I'm curious what you like catching the most.
You know what's crazy is I have a salmon, steelhead, and trout business, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't show you my actual package, but um, this is what I make a living off. This is
Yep.
my only job.
Yep.
And I probably fish for steelhead, salmon, and trout one time a year because I'm so consumed with tournament fishing. If there was a tournament for steelhead or salmon or trout, I would fish that too. But there's not. There's a derby, and it's just like, one person wins with a big fish. But I just love the competition. So if I had to pick one, um, I would go up to Washington and fish for like fall Chinook. It's pretty fun catching a 30-pound salmon in the river. Yeah, so I think that's what I would do. Winter steelhead is also pretty fun, especially up north. The further south you get, it's not quite as good, but there's some places up north where you can catch 20-pound steelhead.
Yeah. What
That's
are
pretty
what
fun.
what are your favorite steelheading rivers?
The Quinault River in Washington, it's I guess you'd call it the peninsula. It's not quite that far up there,
Yeah.
but the Olympic Peninsula. And the only reason for me is because my one of my best friends is native, and you have to have
Uh,
somebody native with you.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's unbelievable, like the fishing there. I took two buddies out there 2 years ago, and for anybody that knows like steelhead fishing, a 20-pounder is like the
Sure.
prize. It's like
Yeah.
maybe like your 10-pound bass,
Yep.
or unless you live in Northern California. But um, so my buddies hooked three over 20 pounds, and we didn't weigh them, but the guide confirmed. He's like, yeah, those are low 20s for sure. And that's pretty crazy spectacle to see. And you can only do that at a river like that. I mean, you may catch a 20-pounder somewhere around here, but not very often.
Yeah. That sounds pretty epic. So let's maybe touch on, your entrepreneurial career a little bit. I think there are a lot of fishermen who would love to figure out some way to, whether it's, they have a full-time job and they want to create a side gig, that's somehow fishing related, or do what you're doing, not specifically with, steelhead and salmon spinners, but figure out a way to build a small business that's somehow fishing connected and fish tournaments as well. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that business has evolved? And I see you, being very active on social media, trying to build that business. And I think having some significant success doing so. Be curious, how you feel
Yeah.
like that's evolved and how's it going?
I would say if you're somebody that's thinking, oh, I want to quit my 9 to 5 so that I can work for myself, so that I can go fishing more, you need to reevaluate, because you're going to go from a
You're gonna be
9 to
working more.
5 to a 24/7.
Yep.
So when I had a 9 to 5, um, I could fish. I could go fishing after work. I could go fishing on the weekends, on my days off. Once I started my own business, all that went away. Do you want to go fishing? No, I can't. I have to stay home and work. So
Yep.
I work really, really hard to be able to go to these tournaments. One of the reasons I don't practice is I just can't leave my own business for that long. I can't go for a week and just leave it. So I would say mentally prepare yourself, if you want to start your own business, to work really, really hard, harder than you've ever worked before, and be expecting a lot of trial and error. Which, if you want to start your own business, you just have to go for it, and you're going to have problems. There's going to be ups and downs. You'll figure it out eventually. But like my first year I started this, I made like $9,000 for the whole year. So it didn't just take off. It took 3 or 4 years to build it up to where I was able to do this, as my full-time job. But it's a lot of work. You can do it, but if you don't want to work really, really hard and basically, give up a lot of things and sacrifice a lot, don't even start it, because there's stuff that's going to come up that you have no idea that's coming. So I hate to be like a bummer on that, but I just want, people to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
If they're going to start their own business.
I think those are wise words, and it's important to have that context, but it's a super huge accomplishment to get it to where you have it. And hopefully that will keep growing. Do you harbor any ambitions to expand into other types of lures, or do you think this is,
I have dabbled.
Okay.
I have dabbled in other things, but like my bread and butter is always going back to that spinner.
Yeah.
And I've kind of figured out that my return is never going to be as good as if I just put all my time into making those spinners. So people just love the spinners.
Yeah. Yeah. And you seem to, so you're in marketing them online, the photos and everything are just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, it's a big help with Instagram. I wouldn't be successful without it, because if you think about it, if you start a business and nobody knows about it, you have to market that business, right? For my business, if someone catches a fish off my lure, what's the first thing they want to do? They want to post a picture of it for me. So I get free advertising everywhere, which has really helped me grow the business. Yeah. So I have quite a few customers that I'm pretty good to, because, they basically help me grow my business.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if there are any tournament bass anglers out there watching this who are also multi-species anglers and would be interested in a Steelhead Slammer lure or 2 or 20, how would they find you?
SteelheadSlammer.com is the website, and Steelhead Slammer Lure Company is the Facebook, and Steelhead_Slammer is the Instagram. And if you watch this podcast and you want to try them, just call me. It's the phone number on the website and everything is just my cell number. Just call me and I'll just send you one. So just to try.
Thanks. That's super cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Super generous. So that's awesome. Thaddeus, it's, I think We've covered a lot of great territory here. I'm curious if there's anything else that it kind of is in the back of your mind that you wanted to share with co-anglers before we wrap up. I want to hand it over to you.
Yeah, for sure. So you'll hear a lot of guys say, time on the water is what's going to help you. Time on the water, time on the water, which is true. This is just my opinion, which is true in the beginning. When you're learning to fish, it's time on the water, learning to cast, learning to tie your knots, learning all the fundamentals of fishing. I think once you get to a level when you're ready to compete, now all of a sudden it's not just time on the water, it's meaningful time on the water. And so what that would mean to me is, I'm going fishing today. Is this just for fun, or am I going to learn something and get better today? Because if I'm my favorite bait is a drop shot, and I feel like I've kind of maxed out the potential for that, it doesn't do me any good to spend the little free time that I have to go throw a drop shot all day. So it's like, I always revert back to like sports. So like basketball, if you're going to practice, you're going to do game shots, right? It's not going to do you any good to go do something that you're not going to get better at and use in the game.
Right.
I mean, if you want to go fun fishing, that's great. If you want to really get better as an angler, the fun fishing may not be as fun, because you need to teach yourself how to use these tools that you may not be great at. Like, focus on your weaknesses. Like, I suck at a chatterbait. Mm-hmm. I go to a tournament and the chatterbait is working for other guys. I'm not just going to throw it, because if I'm competing against guys that are great at that, I'm not going to have a chance. So find your weaknesses, take them to your local lakes, wherever it could translate, and work on those weaknesses to get better, because you're going to find yourself in a situation in a tournament where there's going to be a bait they're eating and you're not going to know how to throw it. And you're going to be kicking yourself that you threw that drop shot at practice all week instead of working on that. Meaningful time on the water, not just time on the water.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yep. I think that those are wise words. Absolutely. And it provides you with a bigger toolkit on game day, even though you, in general, as you said, if there's a bait that really works well for you, on game day, you probably want to stick with that unless it's not working. And then because of all that effort, you have a bigger toolkit that you can potentially
deploy. For sure. Yeah. If you have 3 baits that you're super successful with, next season, try to make that 4 or 5.
Yep.
In your off season, add another one, make it 6, make it 7. Now, all of a sudden, whatever's thrown at you, you're ready for it.
Yep. Going through this podcast, the one thing that you mentioned that popped into my mind, I spend time on the Delta and then also foothill lakes. So you end up being fairly versatile because of that combination, but I don't fish blade baits much. And it did my eyebrows raised a little bit when you mentioned that. So sounds like that's something that you've added to your toolkit.
Yeah, definitely. It can be a player. Spoon too.
Yeah.
Guys, if you get caught in a situation that's pre-spawn or fall, possibly summer, but probably not, where you're out in the middle of the lake and your pro is scoping and you can't reach the bank for the life of you and there's nothing out there, throw a spoon or a blade. You can throw it as far as you can and just flutter back, and you'll cover so much of the water column in every direction that you could kind of get it in front of any possible fish that's around you. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot better than throwing a bait and just letting it sit out there where there may not be a fish within 50 feet of your bait,
Yep. And they got some flash and, potentially if the water's clear can attract fish over some distance. So that's a great strategy. Super. Well, hey, Thaddeus, I want to thank you so much for several things. One, you've been a big supporter of, nascent Coangler's Garage, subscribing right away, being willing to jump on the show. I really appreciate it. And I can guarantee you that there's going to be a lot of people out there on the West Coast and probably beyond the West Coast who appreciate what you've shared with us here today.
We'll find out in the comments section.
Yeah.
They'll be grilling me, I'm sure.
I really want to thank you and just remind everybody, if you do the type of fishing where you might benefit from one of the Steelhead Slammer spinners, check them out. And Thaddeus, best of luck to you the rest of the year. It sounded like you might be fishing the One Bass Havasu tournament.
Yeah, I'm about to head out for that this weekend, so that'll be fun. Those tournaments for me are just like a vacation. Going to Arizona, Havasu, Mojave, Mead, that's fun times.
Yeah, good. I love Havasu. So wish you the best of luck there, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to the Coangler's Garage podcast, episode number 4, with Thaddeus Vinson, the first place co-angler at the 2025 BAM Pro-Am at Don Pedro Reservoir. If you're new to Coangler's Garage, our goals are to give co-anglers a greater voice in the tournament community, to build community amongst co-anglers, both regionally and across the country, and to help us all become better tournament co-anglers by learning from each other. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and come visit us elsewhere on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Coangler's Garage. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.